Hello, self-explorers, and welcome back to Soul Astrology. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the stages of development of consciousness through instinct, intellect, intuition, illumination, and emptiness. Before we start, remember to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any updates, and to like and share. Click the link to download your free guide, your essential guide to soul astrology, and that will really help you to understand soul astrology a little bit better. And you can read about the 12 zodiac signs and their soul-centered meanings in more depth in my book, Soul Astrology, how your rising sign reveals your soul path and life purpose. Okay, so let's begin. So in our journey of spiritual awakening, our consciousness appears to go through stages. It doesn't really. It's just that we're awakening to the way things really are. A great sage, Ramana Maharshi, once said, there are no levels of reality. There are just levels of experience for the experiencer. So it's important to bear that in mind, but from our own perspective on our journey, we appear to go through stages. And in esoteric astrology, the Tibetan described these stages as instinct, intellect, intuition, and illumination. So in our journey, we pass through stages, and I would add a fifth stage, that of emptiness. Astrologer Melanie Reinhardt, who wrote the book Chiron, The Healing Journey, she associated the planet Pluto with emptiness. And emptiness is the highest teaching in Tibetan Buddhism. It's considered the highest wisdom of Tibetan Buddhism. So after illumination comes emptiness. So we have instinct, intellect, intuition, illumination, and emptiness. So we might think of instinct as being like an animalistic stage. There is intelligence. All of these stages have intelligence. There is intelligence in instinct, but the intelligence is without reason. It doesn't have intellect yet. So if we look at animals like bees, for example, who perform fantastic actions of behavior every day, they navigate their way through the world. They go out and pick up pollen from the flowers and go back to the beehive. And scientists have studied the lives of bees, and they're amazingly complex, and they perform an important function in the world. But all of the bee's behavior is based on instinct. The bee is never thinking about what it's doing in the way a human being thinks. Its behavior is instinctive, so it's an instinctive intelligence. When we come to intellect, we can see that this is the place where most of us are. We have come through, and we can still use the level of instinct. It's important to realize that these stages don't go away. We don't leave, like leaving kindergarten and moving into higher school. We don't leave behind instinct and move into intellect. It's more like we add it on. So it's more like now we have the basic operating system of instincts, but on top of that, we have the added ability of intellect. So what do we mean by intellect? It goes beyond thinking. It's the capacity for thinking. It's the capacity for reason. It's the capacity for logic, and the capacity for forming complex mental concepts and structures, mental structures. So we use our intellect in thinking and planning and forming groups and forming communities and societies. So we can see how we use instinct as well as intellect together. Then when we move to intuition, some of us are moving into the realm of intuition. Intuition is the ability to sense more of the energy around us without thought, without thinking about it. So as we become more heart-centered and the heart becomes awakened, we move into intuition. the language of the heart. But we don't leave intellect behind, and we don't leave instinct behind. We build on it. So we become somebody who has the capacity for instinct and intellect and intuition. As we awaken more into our capacities, we move into illumination. We begin to see what the great masters taught us about light and the nature of light, and that everything is light. So we can see that that's quite an advanced stage of consciousness. That's only really spoken about by saints and mystics and yogis who've reached that level of awareness and begun to realize the nature of light, that our solid world is less solid than we thought it was, and that things are actually made of light. And then finally, the last stage of emptiness is where we realize that everything is empty. So what that means in Buddhism is that it's empty of an inherent nature. So for example, the table doesn't exist as a table, they would say, from its own side. The table doesn't think it's a table. It only becomes a table because of the causes and conditions, the people that have made the table, the people that have put the components of it together, and the fact that we then label it table. We look at that so-called solid object and say, oh, that's a table. So in Buddhism, they say that things only exist by way of causes and conditions and labeling, but they're empty of any inherent existence. And quantum physics science is now supporting that by looking closer and closer and closer at a quantum level and an atomic level. There is no table there. The actual quantum physics says that what we think of as solid is actually more empty than solid. So when you look at a subatomic level, a quantum level, there's actually nothing there. It's more space than solid matter. There's more space than there is actual particles. And what holds something together like a table in what appears to be solid matter is actually a magnetic field. It's actually a magnetic field that holds it together. For today's purposes, we're not going to go too far down that road. We're just staying on the subject of being aware that our consciousness will, as we awaken, our consciousness will develop through these stages. And we can relate these stages in soul astrology to the planets. In esoteric astrology and in conventional astrology, it's said that really the outer planets don't have much influence on us as individuals. And that's because we don't yet have the consciousness to resonate with them. So they have an influence more on a collective level. But on an individual level, as we start to awaken in consciousness, as we become more spiritually awakened, we will start to sense the resonance of the outer planets. So at the beginning of our journey, at the level of instinct, we're mainly resonating with what we call the personal planets, which is the Sun, Moon, Mercury, Mars, and Venus. And then as we move more into the intellect, as we become more aware of and using intellect, then we're more open to the influence of the social planets, Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn helps us with social structures. Jupiter helps us be more gregarious and expand our societies and our intellect and our love of learning and wisdom. And then once we move into more of the heart center and we start to open up, then Uranus becomes more important in our chart, because Uranus is the planet of intuition. Uranus helps us. The action and activities of Uranus in our chart will help us to awaken more intuition and be more aware of our intuition and the language of the heart. Then, as we move more into the stage of illumination, we then become open to the influences of Neptune. Neptune, the planet of illumination. Neptune can bring in a lot of illusion and delusion, but in our journey of spiritual awakening, we are awakening from the illusion and wanting to see reality as it really is. So under the influence of Neptune comes a great disillusionment, because the illusion that's not real needs to dissolve so that we can begin to perceive reality as it really is. And then when we get to the highest wisdom, the wisdom of emptiness, then we become more aware of the influence of Pluto. Pluto is associated with emptiness. The effects of Pluto can show us where we still might be clinging to some remnants of illusion, and can reveal the treasure that is our own true nature, ourselves as we really are. So Pluto can be the great treasure revealer once we're working from a state of being more awake. So in our journey of spiritual awakening, our consciousness goes through the stages of instinct, intellect, intuition, illumination, and finally, emptiness. Remember to click the link below to download your free guide and learn more about soul astrology. And when you're ready to go deeper, have a look at my book, Soul Astrology: How Your Rising Sign Reveals Your Soul Path and Life Purpose. That tells you a lot more about the soul purpose of each of the 12 signs. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you love soul astrology, remember to like and share and subscribe to this channel. See you next time.